Today I started working on the politics in War Iceberg. There is a lot of depth to this browser game and I thought this would be a cool way to explore it. So, the things at the top of the iceberg are relatively well known, and the things at the bottom of the iceberg are relatively unknown and secret. The concepts and events on the iceberg are things being discussed by some fragment of the community. Just because I mention them doesn't mean they are true, or that I support any of it. So Tier 1. Everyone knows. The official tutorials suck. The in-game tutorial and the videos on the official Politics and War YouTube channel are outdated. All the official tutorials were created 3 or more years ago, and the advice they give isn't just useless, it's often damaging. For example, the official tutorial suggests you buy farms. This is a waste of money since you can buy food for cheaper than you would produce it. The official Discord is inactive. So Politics and War's official Discord is inactive and completely abandoned by the community. The only reason people are still in the server is so that they can message anyone in the game without sending friend requests. The reason it's inactive will be discussed later on the iceberg. Drew and Facebook. Politics and War has around 10,000 players. 3,000 of them found the game through Facebook advertisements, and another 3,000 found the game after the YouTuber Drew Donnell made a video about it. Drew's video is also special because all those players joined at once, doubling the game's population and changing the community quite a bit. People refer to it as the Drew Invasion. PNW Origins. Politics and War is based on Cybernations, which was in turn based on Nationstates, and there is a strong overlap between the communities. MPO can drink. The most important players and alliances are from Cybernations, and have been in the community for more than a decade. The New Pacific Order and several other alliances formed in 2003, and are at least 18 years old. Their members like to joke that the alliance is old enough to vote and drink. Nationstates is for cowards. Politics and War is more competitive than Nationstates. You can declare war on any other nation, destroy their infrastructure, and stop them buying resources and progressing. Nation-states players dispute this by arguing that players can destroy enemy regions or alliances, whereas in Politics and War, then alliances can only be couped or voluntarily disbanded. In Politics and War, then it's easier to defeat players. In nation-states, it's easier to defeat alliances. What is your alliance? This is the first question you will be asked after joining the game, and probably the second question you will be asked in every conversation about it. Each alliance has its own perspective, narrative, values, and quirks. Telling someone what alliance you're in gives them an idea of what you believe, and which side of the argument you will be on. Also, the validity of your opinion is directly related to who your alliance is allied to or enemies of. For example, if you are a member of Rose and you criticize Guardian, everyone will just dismiss your argument as propaganda. Or they'll look for things Rose has done in the past to make you sound like a hypocrite, even if you had nothing to do with those decisions. 100 bill banks. The total amount of cash and resources is visible on the data visualization page and the world map page. There's more than 300 billion and less than 10 alliance banks, which is crazy. What's even more crazy is that this might be referring to net wealth. If you include resources, then there's more than 1 trillion and 10 alliance banks, and each of them has 100 billion or more. Pixel hugger. A pixel hugger is someone that hates war and will try to avoid it or complain about it. This is a competitive game and other players will look down on pixel huggers and suggest they should be playing other games like Clash of Clans and Farmville. Other players will also say, toughen up, put on a brave face, and it's a game and everything you lose can be rebuilt. This is especially true in the other game, because everything is cheap. War dodgers. War dodgers are like pixel huggers, but it's not necessarily the same thing. If you leave your alliance during a war, for whatever reason, and that's the distinction, you're unreliable and untrustworthy. Alliances talk, and you will find it hard to get into another good alliance without proving you're unfazed by war. Scammers. There are a couple of scams in Politics and War, but the one everyone knows involves new players. It takes a lot of investment for your nation to become competitive in this game, so alliances will give new players a lot of money. This is usually 3 or 4 times more than they receive from the new players in taxes. If the nation stays in the alliance, they will eventually see a return on investment. But if the new player quits, changes alliance, or doesn't follow instructions, then the alliance will never see a return on investment. In character versus out of character. IC versus OOC. The community will often discourage role-playing, but what they mean by this is unnecessary role-playing. Role-playing your nation's elections doesn't affect anyone else, so it doesn't matter. But the community still encourages you to create a character like D&D or something. Perhaps in PNW you want to be a mercenary, a dictator, a saint, a revolutionary, the richest player in the game. Your name, profile picture, and actions make up your character, and they can be completely different from who you really are. Some alliances are very strict and you do not discuss real life at all. Others list their real names on their forums or on Facebook groups. Oh, and the slash in this refers to the in-character and out-of-character divide. You shouldn't be calling someone a bad person for their actions in a game. Just because someone attacked your alliance does not make them an Austrian painter. Alliances are countries. Your nation is not a country. You're basically a citizen of an alliance, which is like a country. The alliance does diplomacy. The alliance collects taxes. The alliance conscripts its members for war. Alliances are mandatory. If you are not in an alliance, you will be endlessly raided by those that are, and you won't be able to grow above City 10 or really participate in the community. Tier 2, the official channels. PNW paid for college. And a house. Alex developed Politics and War when he was a teenager, and he made a lot of money. He's talked about this on podcasts quite a lot, and there's a lot of speculation in the community. Supposedly, a player pretended to be Microsoft and offered Alex $100,000 for the game, and he declined. Alex's ban. Alex helped code and was eventually banned from Cybernations. If I recall correctly, he intentionally got himself banned by shitposting on their forums, but I don't know why. Anyhow, this prompted him to create Politics and War so he could play the game again and perhaps spite CN. Global Wars is scheduled. Before Global Wars, then Alliance leaders will give Alex a heads up. They'll tell him what day they are planning to attack and how many people they expect to be involved, so he can prepare the servers. When this doesn't happen, the website often crashes. Pixel Nations. A player named Greenie bought Pixel Nations, the precursor to Politics and War, that was also developed by Alex. Some alliances still consider Pixel Nations to be superior to Politics and War. There were a lot of interesting game mechanics, but there was some game-breaking bug that ultimately destroyed it. War names. There are multiple names for every war. Alliances like to have their own stories, and what one alliance might consider a war of liberation, another might consider tyranny. A good example of this is the Great War, which is also called Global War 14, Endgame, Dial-Up, MPO's Lost Time, Rockpocalypse, and Nights of Tragedy. Different sides have their own names for it, and different alliances have their own names for it. Alex Sus. Alex plays the game and he's even become high government in major alliances. He does this to learn what players truly think of updates and to investigate reports of cheating. The Moon. Alex has talked about adding the Moon and colonizing Mars to the game for the past few years. Most of the player base thinks this is ridiculous and unlikely to ever happen, but if you pay attention, he added the space program project, and he's previously created a game called Martian Empires, so there's a good chance it will actually happen. Water. A couple of years ago, then alliances with small nations were writing game suggestions that would make smaller nations stronger, and alliances with larger nations were writing game suggestions that would make larger nations stronger. Eventually someone got sick of this and suggested adding water as a resource. It wouldn't do anything but waste the game developer's time, so we couldn't work on these other dumb suggestions. Alex does not know politics, so Alex rarely knows what's happening in the community. He abstains because it would be a lot of work, but also because it would make him biased. However, that also means he relies on some older players for advice, and these players often act in the interest of the oldest and most powerful alliances. PNW socials. There is a Facebook page, Twitter page, Steam group, etc. Some of them can be a bit wacky. I'm pretty sure the Twitter page jokingly said it was going to add the border wall project that would reduce immigration and therefore crime. This was never mentioned anywhere else, and it definitely wasn't added to the game. No multis. You can only have one nation. This is stated in the game rules, but unlike other games, it is enforced and monitored closely by other players. Solo developer. There are only a handful of people running the game. Alex used to do all the game development and moderation, but now it's delegated to several volunteers and people he's hired. Google Play Terms of Service. Politics and War was removed from the Google Play Store for a while because it broke the terms of service. Apps must state if there are in-app purchases, and PNW didn't because they were officially called donations. Google did not share that perspective. After a couple of weeks, then PNW was added back to the Play Store with in-app purchases under the name. The Test Server. There is a second version of Politics and War known as the Test Server. It is 4 times faster than the main server and has a bunch of experimental projects and game mechanics. Almost every year there is a test server tournament, where alliances will fight in a giant battle royale. This lasts about a week, and the alliance with the highest score wins. Tier 3. Constantly discussed. The Great War. In 2019 there was a huge war involving every alliance in the game. It lasted 248 days and more than 40% of the player base quit when it ended. People still have really strong feelings about this war, even 3 years later, and which side alliances were on still affects their current relationships. Get good/competency. There are casual players and there are competent players. The casual players log in once every day and attack using whichever unit they have most of. The competent players log in 10 times a day and attack using the latest strategies and in coordination with other members of their alliance. Get good is what these more competent players will tell the casuals when they lose. The meat grinder. Alliances will sometimes instruct their members to fight unwinnable wars. This might be to slow down an opponent or to ensure someone else wins their war. When alliances are doing this with hundreds of players and progress is very slow, then it's called a meat grinder. The established powers. The big alliances, Syndicate, the Knights Radiant, Rose, etc., they've been around for years, and occasionally they work together against rising powers, newer alliances which might threaten their relative power. The top 10%. The top 10 alliances account for 50% of the game's total revenue, observable wealth, and presumably unobservable wealth. Protectorates are mandatory. If a new alliance doesn't have a protectorate, it is almost guaranteed to fail. This is because other alliances will relentlessly attack it, and the alliance's government will find it hard to learn and teach the game mechanics. Protectors also introduce you to other alliances which you might work with in the future. It's very hard to network without help. NPO invasions. NPO goes around conquering games and trying to permanently become number one. Weekly radios. There have been bi-weekly radio shows for the past 3 to 5 years. Legacies. Some alliances are considered successors to others. This is interesting because new alliances are meant to be a fresh start. So these successors cherry-pick the good history. We're just as good as that alliance was militarily. Oh, we've always fought against the hegemonies. That sort of stuff. They leave out the fact they lost all their money with bad decisions, or that they betrayed one of their allies. Bipolarity versus multipolarity. Bipolarity refers to when the game is divided into 2 coalitions, and multipolarity refers to when the game is divided into multiple coalitions. Bipolarity results in fewer but fairer wars. Multipolarity has more wars, but they tend to be less fair. In both systems, then the stronger alliances will drift towards one another and beat down on the weaker ones. Spheres are everything. Most of the time, politics is just people discussing who is in what sphere and which of these alliances will be fighting next. Alliances control development. The development and moderation teams are composed of volunteers from the community. These volunteers are from the same few alliances, so a lot of people are suspicious of them. Supposedly, one alliance controls the official Discord, another controls the wiki, and another controls the forums, and another is helping Alex with in-game moderation. There is also another theory related to this. This is a free game, but some people do donate, and some alliances donate more than others. These big spenders supposedly have influence over how the game is developed. Alex has even admitted that he's really hesitant to balance the game, because it would mean negatively affecting players that bought advantages. The Johnsons. In 2021, then Delta Block was forced to change its name to The Johnsons as part of a peace agreement. The Johnsons eventually disbanded, and the name has been attributed to the weakest block in the game ever since. Though, there is a segment of the community that likes to ironically claim that the Johnsons is the strongest block. People don't attack the mighty Johnsons out of fear, and not because it would be punching down. Opinions on Camelot. There's no way to explain this without getting an angry comment. I'll default to the podcaster's explanation. Camelot has very vocal enemies, that made it cool to trash talk them. This snowballed and they have received the most toxicity of any alliance in the game's history, except for arguably MPO. However, they are a normal alliance, so a sizable portion of the game likes them and does not understand the irrational hatred towards them. No CBs. CB stands for casus belli, which translates to reason or justification for war. Over time, that alliances have stopped telling their members and the community why they're going to war. This has led people to believe that the global wars are purely economic. The big alliances are just trying to destroy some of their competitors' infrastructure and stay in the top 10. This makes sense, and leaders from major alliances have occasionally admitted it's true. Literally MPO. So this is the equivalent of saying you are literally an Austrian painter, but for alliances. The big alliances accuse MPO of being totalitarian and trying to destroy other alliances through prolonged war and unreasonable peace terms. They have also been labeled a cult. There's a lot to unpack about MPO, and maybe I'll do a video about it one day. For now, if someone is saying another alliance is like MPO or literally MPO, then just dismiss it as them being hyperbolic. No modern alliance is like MPO. Even MPO fails to live up to what MPO is supposed to be. Forums are dying. Politics and War was originally played through forums and IRC, the Internet Relay Chat, as was its predecessors, Cybernations and Nationstates. Because of this, some alliances still require their members to join their private forums, despite everything having moved to Discord around 2016. Slowly the forums are all disappearing, as are the millions of posts on them with the game's oldest lore. The PNW official forums are also slowly going inactive. It can go weeks without anyone posting if there are no major wars. And it's not just new players that are refusing to use the forums. Alliances have stopped making posts when they declare war or sign new treaties, in a trend that started with the Silent War in 2016. The explanation is that when you make a post, then other diplomats will type thousands of words criticizing it, so by not posting you get to avoid the criticism. This has resulted in a weird dynamic in wars now, because one alliance will post the declaration of war and will rant for days on end, whilst the other remains completely silent. You'll see an alliance declare war, and then get harsher and harsher with their rhetoric, and more confident in their victory, and then the next day they'll be surrendering, apologizing, complimenting their enemy on their mercy and sportsmanship. It is really strange. Indian politics. Indians and Pakistanis are a sizable portion of the game's community, and for the most part they get along and like to rant about their respective countries' politics. Meanwhile, a lot of Americans and Europeans refuse to discuss real-life politics. So this is sort of the only real politics people frequently discuss without getting told to shut up. As a result, the average PNW player probably has a better understanding of Indian politics than their own local politics. Superior time zones. Most wars in PNW start at day change, which is 0000 UTC time. This is 8 PM Eastern Standard Time, which is pretty good for the Americans, since they launch their second airstrike at 10 PM and won't launch more attacks until 6 AM or 8 AM the following morning. Australia has day change at 10 AM, and they launch their next attack at noon, and then at 8 PM, and then at 4 AM. There's a debate between the Americans and the Australians over who has the better time zone, and almost everyone else has a bad one and likes to complain a lot. This resulted in Alex allowing people to customize their day change, but most people don't do it because they want to sync their attacks with the rest of their alliance, and most of the game's players are American. News competition. There are a bunch of news servers that are competing with one another to be the most popular community server. This is because the PNW server has been captured by some alliances, and its moderation really sucks. These news servers are also controlled by groups of alliances, but they have better moderation. And if you disagree with their leaning, then you can join another news server that's run by your alliance or an alliance allied to you that'll be more favorable. 50 news shows. The news servers have a category of channels called shows. These were all radio shows or podcasts, but they have since moved to being text shows, which is effectively a Twitter feed. This has resulted in some players being elevated to the role of celebrity within the community, despite not being all that interesting. The lower expectations get for these shows, the more of them pop up. We have probably already exceeded 50 of them, and 10% of them are writing really detailed articles. It's just that 90% of them are just posting memes they created on Meme Generator, or reposting each other's memes, which is just so dumb. Micro. A micro is a small alliance with new players. It used to be a derogatory term, but at some point new players just sort of accepted it, and now it's just a descriptor. Anti-hegemony. When an alliance or sphere becomes too powerful, they are accused of forming a hegemony, and coalitions are created to fight and weaken them. Some alliances fight with the hegemony, and others fight against it. Those fighting against it are taking the most risk and being the most virtuous in the eyes of the community. This has led to weird situations where the most powerful alliances are still pretending they are rebels, fighting against the elite, so they can continue to remain virtuous in the eyes of the community. So that was tiers 1 to 3, the introductory phase. Later tiers will have more interesting and obscure information, so stay tuned. And if you found it interesting, then like, subscribe, share it, or something. 70% of people that watch my videos are not subscribed, so let's improve that. And oh yeah, if you want to contribute to the iceberg, then comment down below with suggestions for later tiers, or join the Discord and you can also make suggestions there.